welcome to Gunther's reading response number 5, and I kind of have to lay this out like this or else the video wouldn't play that I have planned for it. So, here we are. This is the readings for the class, Beware of the Standards, Not Just the Test by Alfie Kohn. This is all about how we need to be aware of certain circumstances that are happening in standardized tests. Alternatives to Standard Tests by Bob Peterson and Monty Neal. This is about what we could do to replace the standardized testing in the United States. Standardized Testing, Restrict or Expand by Nelson Pulaski and McCarthy. This is all about how do we need to expand the SLL testing, like the standardized testing for different states, or do we need to restrict it and base it off the teacher's thought process? Student-based reform, real challenge, or badly flawed policy. This goes behind the policy about what happens to the standardized test and is it a good policy. And the essay by Kristen Morrison, I called it essay because that's what it seemed like to me. I didn't want to type out the whole name of it. It was too long. But the fifth one was all about whether we should even include standardized testing is a good way to phrase it. And so all these have one thing in common. All these have the standardized testing in mind. Should we keep them? Should we ban them? Should we throw them in the garbage? Should we expand on them? Should we do this? And I think that this all started with the brandishing of IQ tests. Because the IQ tests...
We think IQ tests are objective evaluations of our mental abilities, but in reality, they are deeply biased and controversial tools that might not predict intelligence at all.
Emily, don't embarrass yourself. Measuring intelligence is what IQ tests are for.
Wrong again. The first IQ test was never intended to measure intelligence. In fact, it was invented in 1904 as a way to assess which French kids were doing well in kindergarten.
Wine is to lunch as cigarette is...
to recess?
Excellent! You are now ready for the French first grade.
Huh, that's awfully specific.
Well, the inventor of the test, Alfred Binet, said that was the point.
My test is for children. It is not meant to apply to everyone.
But that all changed thanks to a man named H.H. Goddard.
I'm going to apply this test to everyone. Hey, everybody! Let's all take this intelligence test.
People liked intelligence testing so much that within a few years, IQ tests had swept the nation.
This test says I'm a regular Marie Curie. I'm positively glowing.
Mine says I'm dumber than a dewdropper all zuzzled on a Sunday.
Well, I'll never marry you now.
And today, we use them to tell how intelligent we are. End of ruin?
Nope. The only thing IQ tests tell you is how good you are at IQ tests. Early tests focus almost entirely on concepts that only rich white folks would know.
That can't be true. I'm not rich and I can answer these questions. Describe everything required by a regatta. Okay, boats, water, and... Wait, I don't know.
My God, he forgot buoys.
And so here's the funny thing. This actually comes from the Standardized Testing, Restrict or Expand by Nelson Pulaski and McCarthy, that the IQ tests were basically to track children based on their test performance, and their intelligence was viewed as raw material required for schooling, and students judged to have less intelligence receive less education. Okay? So that's the background for the IQ test, but it produced the unintended result of limiting children's education access. Students performing at the lowest levels on IQ tests received an education designed to prepare them to be tractable, unskilled laborers. That was the last bit here. So basically, these people who failed the IQ test because they weren't rich, they weren't white, were basically being forced into unskilled labor distribution. And this goes back into the the writing last week about how, teachers, the federal government throughout, like, all past the Civil War. I'm sorry for spouting out words and sounding like I'm off track. It's because, well, I have a horrible learning impediment in my head that, I kind of have to talk like this. Even if I have the notes in front of me, I'll keep doing this. But anyway, and basically this sets up a world where only the rich white man can survive. So let me ask, what do we test kids on? That was another good important thing. What do we test kids on? With the SOLs, why do we test kids? And it's for two things. One is to test the intelligence of the child. See where the child is at. Number two is the resources that the school gets. And that's why we test children. Because the more intelligent they are, the more resources they get. Let's say you're in a school with disabled people and, a lot of people with learning disabilities. Well, kiss the federal government goodbye. That is basically what it's saying. Because it's basically saying that the materials only go to the schools that are the most equipped for intelligence. And that's sad because a lot of these schools, let me give you an example. There's a school in England that deals with, people who are hard at speaking and, have a hard time thinking and stuff like that. If we sat them down to take this test and then took all their funding away, it would be astronomically hard to teach those kids. Because now you have to teach them to take a test. And I think that's the broad story. But before I say teach them to take a test, there's another thing to consider. I didn't know this going into, because I grew up taking the SOL test. Basically, I grew up when SOL tests were a norm when they first came out. So it was a first thing. But apparently, you can use your exam to replace your final grade. Doesn't that sound stupid? Idiotic? Hypocrisy? Why use the final exam to replace your grade? Let's say you're a struggling student like me who hates reading. We hate reading. Okay? Why would you give us a test to basically say you suck at reading? Because I remember in 12th grade, I had to retake the SOL test because I was so bad at reading. I scored a 350 on the reading SOL test because of my disability. ADHD, there was a lot of noises going on. There was a lot of, distractions going on. I couldn't focus. And so they had me retake it, and if you fail 3 of the questions, you had to stay a year behind. Doesn't that sound stupid to you? Idiotic? What would happen? I understand that, being in 12th grade, you're like, great, I'm about to graduate. Heck yeah! But staying a year behind your peers because of a simple reading test should not be the reason why you stay behind. Because it could have been flawed. There could have been a lot of distractions in the classroom and stuff like that. So I think that we need to abolish SOLs. And there's more than this. It adds student stress. It adds teacher stress. One of the things that I have up here is that in 2014, nearly half of the teachers considered leaving due to standardized testing. Half of good teachers. My mom works in a clinic, And when the student testing began, everything was fine until the second year when they started pushing out teachers that didn't get high testing scores. They were freaking awesome teachers. They taught you life lessons. They taught you what you need to do to survive. What do you need to do in this sort of situation? Hey, by the way, here's what the federal government told us to tell you. Here you go. And it also creates stress on the teachers, because now the teachers have to basically tell the students, hey, by the way, we're not learning what you want to learn. We're learning what's on a test. And I think that is a mean way to put it. Instead of having that teacher-student relationship of, oh, you don't understand this? Let's try again next class and try to make it easier for you to understand. No, it's, we got to learn what's for the test. We got to learn what's for the test. We got to learn what's for the test. You know what? If I don't get y'all to learn what's on the test, I'm going to lose my job. And that is emotionally terrifying and also stressful for the teacher to deal with. Now back to the federal government spending. Thank you. Alright, so this one right here basically says that the federal government gets to control what you teach. And I think that's very important, because I don't think the federal government should tell us what we should teach. I think that the teachers should teach the students, because the teacher will know more about the students through time. And basically, it's two reasons why the federal government should not influence teaching. One, it's because of what I just said, that the teacher knows the student better than the federal government knows the student, because they'll know them on a more personal level. But also, two, the 10th Amendment, yes, 10th Amendment of the Constitution doesn't dictate that the federal government needs to be funding schools. And I think that's a good thing to take in, because not only does the federal government is not supposed to be funding schools, but they can get into serious trouble about it. And so that's why I think we should not have the federal government controlling our schools. So, should the federal government give a boost to schools to teach material? No! It's a horrible idea, because if the federal government, and this is my thought process, if the federal government controls schools like it does now, schools with disabilities and stuff will get less funding. And I think that basically the government really needs to help classrooms with disabilities and stuff like that. But also, too, are we thinking about what happens when the federal government adds standardized testing? And we've actually seen proof of this. The proof where art classes are being taken away because now we need to know this information in order to get school funding. Music classes being taken away because we need to know this information versus y'all need to learn this information so that way you can pass this test. What does that send the message to the kids? Our lives aren't important. You know what it is? Apparently this test, and it will hurt them emotionally, physically, and emotionally. It hurts teachers and students, because not only are you firing teachers for a test, you're also hurting the children's expression through art and through written literature and also through music, because some of these students could grow up to be great artists. Some of these students could be grown up to be great musicians. And that's the problem. When you take that away from them, they will be hurt because they have to pass the test. So how do we change it? I think have federal government support what the teachers are teaching. That should be it. So if the teacher teaches art, have the federal government support the art teacher. If the teacher proposes a new deal about, we should teach math but like science, then have the federal government support that idea. We should have the federal government on our backs rather than against us. Because if we take this whole standardized testing route, what's going to happen is basically good teachers are going to lose their jobs. Activities are going to be taken away from students that have done nothing wrong except for fail a test. And that financial aid is going away from disabled people and how, they actually need the money in order to express themselves. And I think that's the main importance. Anyway, here's my references for everything and the YouTube video and everything else. But thank you for joining along on this spiel. The question for today is, how would you change SOL testings? I think that they should be banned on the fact that it destroys school systems, it makes teachers stressed, it makes the students stressed, it makes hard student-teacher relationships to happen because it's all about take the test, take the test, take the test. And it actually hurts a lot of people emotionally by taking out activities that aren't seen academically appropriate. Anyway, thank you for joining me, and have a nice one. Bye! So the question is, should the federal government give a boost to schools for teaching materials? I think not. I think the teachers should honestly grade the students on what they should be doing. Like if they're good at art, have them display through art about the topic at hand. If they're good at writing, have a writing little exam for the thing at hand. If they're good at music, have them create a song about the math equation they've created and stuff like that. And I think that would be a beneficial way to teach students what to do rather than to teach students, okay, you need to learn how to take a test, you need to learn how to take a test, you need to learn how to take a test. Because that's how my high school experience was. And I feel like the test thing has pressured so many teachers, pressured so many students, because all it's there for is that we have to pass this test or else the federal government will not give us aid. And how do we change it? We have the federal government support what teachers are doing. Rather than saying, teachers aren't teaching them the right way, I think that we should have teachers supporting the federal government supporting what the teachers are teaching. So that way, when these new students come out of high school, they don't feel like they're left out. They don't feel like they're mistreated. And most likely, what's going to happen is that the student will know exactly what he's going to do right out the doors from high school. And I think that's the moral of what every student should learn. What they want to do after high school. Anyway, here's my references for what I found, and also, what the YouTube video and stuff like that. The question I will present to the class: should we have the federal government involved in our schooling? I'm saying no, because of the stress it puts on teachers, the stress that it puts on students, and the fact that 9 times out of 10, students are misplaced because of these tests. And funding is getting ripped from schools, and teachers are getting fired because of these tests. So that's my answer. Thank you all for joining. Bye.